Nathan Cross stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, his reflection hard and unsmiling in the glass. The city sprawled below like a glittering chessboard, one he'd mastered through calculated moves and ice-cold decisions. But today, even his Vista View corner office felt like a cage. "You want me to what?" He turned to face his family lawyer, Mr. Patterson, who sat calmly across from his desk. "Your grandfather's will is quite clear," Patterson said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "To inherit the family holdings and maintain control of Cross Industries, you must be married within 6 months." Nathan's jaw clenched. At 35, he'd built his tech empire through brilliance and ruthlessness, not by playing by anyone else's rules. "This is ridiculous. The board respects me. The company's value has tripled under my leadership. Nevertheless, your grandfather believed marriage would make you a more stable leader." Patterson's diplomatic tone did nothing to soften the message. "He worried your reputation for being coldly analytical might someday damage the company's image." Nathan paced the office, his Italian leather shoes silent on the plush carpet. His grandfather's words from their last conversation echoed in his mind. "There's more to life than profit margins, son." The old man's declining health had made him sentimental, but Nathan had built his success on logic, not emotion. Every problem had a solution. This one would too. "Fine. I'll find someone suitable." He returned to his desk, already pulling up his tablet. "Have legal draft a contract. I'll treat this like any other business arrangement." Patterson's eyebrows rose. "A marriage contract?" "Exactly. 3 years, clear terms, generous compensation." Nathan's fingers flew over the screen. "I need someone presentable, intelligent, no scandals. Someone who understands this is purely business." His eyes landed on a news article about an upcoming charity gala. The featured image showed a young woman speaking passionately about art education. Lily Wang, curator of the struggling but respected wine gallery. Her background check would be clean. She came from a good family, despite their recent financial troubles, and her reputation for integrity would make her trustworthy with a contract. "I think I've found our solution." Nathan turned the tablet to show Patterson. "Set up a meeting." The lawyer studied the image, frowning. "Mr. Cross, marriage isn't a merger." "Everything's a deal, Patterson. The trick is finding the right terms." Nathan stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "Make it happen." 2 days later, Nathan sat across from Lily in an upscale restaurant's private dining room. She was even more striking in person, poised, with intelligent eyes that assessed him just as carefully as he studied her. "So," she said, setting down her water glass, "you want to marry me for business reasons." "I appreciate directness." "Yes." He outlined the terms, the timeline, the public appearances required, the substantial payment she'd receive. "Your gallery gets a generous patron, you get financial security, and I get my inheritance. Simple." Lily's laugh held no humor. "Simple? You're talking about 3 years of my life. 3 years during which you'll want for nothing. Your gallery will thrive. Your family's debts will vanish." He leaned forward slightly. "I'm offering you freedom, Ms. Wang. Financial freedom to pursue your real passions without compromise." He saw the moment his words hit home. Her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on her napkin. He'd read her situation correctly. She was desperate enough to consider it, proud enough to resist. "And what about love?" she asked quietly. "Love is inefficient. This is a business arrangement between consenting adults." He pulled out a folder containing the preliminary contract. "We'll both get what we want, without messy emotions complicating things." Lily studied him for a long moment. "You really believe that, don't you? That you can control everything, keep it all in neat boxes?" "It's worked so far." He slid the folder toward her. "Take a day to think it over. Have your lawyer review it. But remember, you have gallery loans coming due next month." She stood smooth and graceful despite the subtle jab. "You really are heartless, aren't you, Mr. Cross?" He smiled, cold and practiced. "I prefer to think of it as efficient. Emotions just get in the way of good business." As he watched her leave, Nathan felt a flicker of something. Admiration, perhaps, for her spirit. But he dismissed it immediately. This was business, nothing more. The fact that his chosen candidate had fire in her eyes and strength in her spine was irrelevant. He had no way of knowing that this simple arrangement would be the first domino to fall in a chain reaction that would shatter every wall he'd built around his heart. Later that night, as Nathan reviewed quarterly reports in his minimalist penthouse, his phone buzzed with a message from Lily. "I accept your terms. But remember, Mr. Cross, even business arrangements can have unexpected variables." He smirked at her attempt at cleverness. After all, what could possibly go wrong with such a perfectly logical plan? The wedding was exactly what Nathan had specified in his detailed plan. Elegant, understated, and absolutely free of any messy emotions. Lily wore a designer gown he'd chosen, smiled at all the right moments, and played her part perfectly. If anyone noticed the lack of joy in the groom's eyes, they didn't dare mention it. 2 months into their arrangement, Nathan sat in his home office, frowning at his laptop screen. The sound of soft piano music drifted in from the living room, an unexpected addition to his usually silent evening routine. "Must you play at this hour?" he called out, more irritated by how the melody kept drawing his attention than the actual music. The playing stopped. Lily appeared in his doorway, still wearing her gallery clothes, a simple black dress that somehow made her look both professional and artistic. "It helps me think. Besides, this is my home too now, remember?" "Technically, yes," he returned to his emails. "But the contract doesn't specify." "Oh, spare me the contract talk." She leaned against the doorframe. "You know, most people actually enjoy having some life in their home." Something in her tone made him look up. She'd been different lately, less careful, more willing to challenge him. It was unsettling. "I enjoy peace and quiet," he replied. "It's more productive." "Right, because heaven forbid anything interrupt the great Nathan Cross's productivity." She shook her head. "You're coming to the gallery opening tomorrow night, aren't you?" He had forgotten. "I have a late meeting." "Cancel it." When he started to protest, she added, "Page 7, Section 3 of our contract. All major public events require both parties to maintain appearances." Nathan's jaw tightened. She was right, and they both knew it. Fine, 1 hour. The next evening, Nathan found himself surrounded by art he didn't understand and people whose passion for it bewildered him. But watching Lily in her element, eyes bright, hands gesturing animatedly as she discussed pieces with guests, stirred something unexpected in his chest. "Your wife is remarkable," said an elderly patron, making Nathan nearly spill his drink. "The way she's revitalized this gallery, such vision." Before he could offer his standard polite response, Lily appeared at his side. "Dance with me," she said, and it wasn't quite a request. "There's no dance floor," he pointed out. She took his hand anyway. "Since when does that stop anyone?" To his own surprise, he let her lead him to a clear space between sculptures. Other couples joined them, swaying to the soft jazz playing through hidden speakers. Lily's hand was warm in his, her other resting lightly on his shoulder. "See? The world doesn't end when you step off script," she murmured. Nathan found himself noticing things he usually ignored. The way her perfume mixed with the scent of her shampoo, how perfectly she fit against him, the slight curl that had escaped her updo. "You're good at this," she said. "Dancing, I mean." "Let me guess, mandatory lessons as a child?" "My mother insisted." The words slipped out before he could stop them. He never talked about his parents. Lily's eyes softened. "Tell me about her." "There's nothing to tell." He stepped back as the song ended, walls slamming back into place. "I should go. Early meeting tomorrow." But that night, lying awake in his perfectly ordered bedroom, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling of her in his arms, the genuine interest in her eyes when she'd asked about his mother. For the first time in years, he found himself thinking about Sunday afternoons long ago, dancing with his mother in their living room, while his father pretended to read the newspaper but secretly watched them with a smile. The next morning, he waited until Lily left for the gallery before entering the living room. The piano sat there, silent and accusing. After a moment's hesitation, he lifted the lid and pressed a key, then another. The notes hung in the air, off-key and awkward, but somehow less offensive than they'd seemed before. His phone buzzed, a message from Lily. "Left my gallery keys on the piano. Could you bring them by later?" Nathan stared at the keys glinting on the black surface. He had meetings, calls, 1,000 important things to do. But his fingers were already reaching for them. "On my way," he typed back, and tried to ignore how his heart seemed to beat a little faster at the thought of seeing her smile. Later, watching her thank him with genuine warmth, he realized with growing unease that the neat boxes he'd built his life around were starting to blur at the edges, and the most terrifying part, a small, treacherous part of him was starting to wonder if that might not be such a bad thing after all. That evening, when the piano music drifted through the penthouse again, Nathan didn't say a word. Instead, he found himself working a little slower, letting the melody wash over him, and wondering when exactly his perfectly ordered world had started to feel a little less perfect and a little more alive. The morning started like any other, with Nathan reviewing reports in his office, until his assistant interrupted with news that would shatter his carefully maintained control. "Sir, Ms. Rebecca Stone is here to see you." Nathan's fingers froze over his keyboard. Rebecca, his ex-girlfriend and now the CEO of a rising tech company, was the last person he expected to see. "Send her in," he said, straightening his tie. The door opened, and there she stood, as polished and calculated as ever. "Nathan, darling." Her smile was practiced perfection. "Married life suits you. Though I must say, I was surprised by your choice." "What do you want, Rebecca?" Always straight to business. She settled into a chair. "I'm proposing a merger. Our companies would be unstoppable together." Before Nathan could respond, the office door opened again. Lily walked in, carrying a lunch bag. She stopped short at the sight of Rebecca. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know you had a meeting." Her smile remained steady, but Nathan caught the slight tension in her shoulders. "Lily, this is Rebecca Stone. She's here to discuss business." The famous ex-girlfriend, Lily said, her tone light but knowing. "I've read about your company's innovative work." Rebecca's perfectly manicured nails tapped against her designer bag. "How lovely that you keep up with business news. Nathan always did prefer intellectual women." The undercurrent of condescension made Nathan's jaw clench. But before he could speak, Lally surprised him. "Actually, I was just heading to the Charity Foundation meeting. Nathan, would you like to join? We're finalizing the arts education program you suggested." He hadn't suggested any such program, but something in Lily's eyes made him play along. "Of course. Rebecca, we'll have to continue this another time." In the elevator, Lily handed him the lunch bag. "You skipped breakfast again." "There's no foundation meeting. I just thought you might need an escape route." "How did you know?" "Your left eye twitches when you're uncomfortable," she grinned. "Don't worry, your reputation for being unreadable is still mostly intact." Over the next few weeks, Rebecca became a constant presence at the office, each meeting loaded with thinly veiled personal agenda. But something had shifted. Nathan found himself watching Lally, how she handled difficult gallery patrons with grace, how she turned his cold penthouse into something that felt like a home, how her unexpected suggestions for his company's charitable initiatives actually made sense. One evening, he'd overheard her on the phone with a young artist. "No, don't give up. Art matters. It reminds us we're human." The words stuck with him through his next meeting with Rebecca. "Think about it," Rebecca was saying. "Our companies are perfect together, just like we were." Nathan looked at the merger proposal, remembering how he once would have jumped at this opportunity. But now? "No," he said quietly, then stronger. "No, your company's values don't align with ours." "Values?" Rebecca laughed. "Since when do you care about values?" "The Nathan I knew cared about profit margins." "People change." "Oh, please. This is about her, isn't it? That gallery girl playing at being a billionaire's wife." Something inside Nathan snapped. "That gallery girl has done more for this company's image in 6 months than our entire PR team did in 5 years. She sees possibilities I miss. She." He stopped, suddenly aware of what he was revealing. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "You've fallen for her," she said incredulously. "Oh, this is rich. The man who said love was for fools, actually in love with his convenience wife." "Get out." His voice was ice. "And Rebecca, don't contact me about business again." That night, Nathan stood in his home office, staring at nothing. Lally's laughter drifted in from where she was hosting a small dinner party, something that would have infuriated him months ago, but now seemed to fill the space with warmth. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister. "Finally saw those photos from the hospital opening. The way you look at her, You're not fooling anyone, big brother. Nathan closed his eyes, remembering how Lily had charmed the children in the cancer ward, how she'd convinced him to double the donation, how proud he felt watching her. No, he whispered to himself, this isn't part of the plan. But as he listened to her voice carrying through their home, Nathan Cross, the man who had built an empire on cold logic, realized with growing panic that some things couldn't be controlled by contracts or calculations. And that terrified him more than any business crisis ever had. The storm that had been building finally broke on a quiet Sunday evening. Lily burst into Nathan's office, her usually composed face tight with worry. The gallery's main investor pulled out. They're saying they'll force a sale if we can't cover the loans by the end of the month. Nathan barely looked up from his laptop. That's unfortunate. Have your lawyers review the contracts. That's it. That's all you have to say. Her voice trembled. This gallery isn't just some business to me, it's my life's work. Finally, he met her eyes. Everything is business, Lily. You knew that when you signed our contract. Our contract? She laughed bitterly. Is that all you see when you look at me? A signature on paper? The raw emotion in her voice made something in his chest tighten. He stood, walking to the window to escape her gaze. What else should I see? I don't know. A partner? A friend? Someone who's shared your home for the past 8 months? She moved closer. Or are you too afraid to see anything that might crack that perfect control? I don't have time for this. He reached for his phone. I have a conference call. No. Lily snatched the phone from his hand. For once in your life, you're going to listen. Do you know what your problem is, Nathan? You treat everything like a business transaction. Every smile, every conversation, every moment of genuine connection, you put it all in neat little boxes with labels and terms and conditions. Because that's what works, he snapped. Emotions are messy, unpredictable. They lead to chaos. Like what's happening to you right now. Her words hit like arrows. I see the way you look at me when you think I'm not watching. How you smile at breakfast before remembering you're supposed to be cold. How you actually laugh at my terrible jokes. Stop. You're terrified because you can't control how you feel. And instead of facing it, you're pushing me away. Nathan's hands clenched. You don't know what you're talking about. Really? Then why did you defend me to Rebecca? Why did you double the hospital donation? Why do you still sit in the living room every evening while I play piano, pretending to work but actually listening? Enough. The word exploded from him. This arrangement was meant to be simple. Clean. You're the one complicating things. Lily stepped back, her eyes shining with unshed tears. No, Nathan. You complicated things the moment you started caring. And now you're too much of a coward to admit it. She walked to his desk and pulled out a file. Here's your precious contract. Article 8 states either party can dissolve the agreement if it becomes untenable. Consider this my notice. The file hit his desk with a soft thud. I'll be gone by morning. Nathan stood frozen, watching her walk away. Words crowded his throat. Words about how the morning light made her look like a painting he'd never understand, how her passion for art had taught him to see beauty in imperfection, how her presence had turned his silent penthouse into a home filled with music and laughter. But he said nothing. Later that night, he found a note on the piano. Some things can't be measured in profit margins or controlled by contracts. Love is one of them. I hope someday you learn that before it's too late. The penthouse felt impossibly empty. Nathan sat at his desk, surrounded by the empire he built, and for the first time in his life, success tasted like ashes in his mouth. His phone buzzed, another message from his sister, just heard from Lily. Big brother, if you let her walk away because you're scared, you're not the man I thought you were. Nathan stared at the contract on his desk. All his life, he believed that control meant safety, that emotions were weakness, that love was a liability. But as the night stretched on, with no piano music to fill the silence, he began to wonder if the real liability was a heart too afraid to feel anything at all. The question was, what was he going to do about it? For the first time in 20 years, Nathan Cross was late to work. He sat in his parked car outside his sister Amy's house, watching the preparations for her backyard wedding. The flowers, the white chairs, the simple arch, it all seemed to mock him. You look terrible, Amy said, sliding into the passenger seat still wearing her wedding dress. When's the last time you slept? I'm fine. But his wrinkled suit and dark circles told a different story. 3 weeks since Lily left, and his perfectly ordered world felt like a prison. Liar. Amy studied him. You know, when I told Rick I loved him, I was terrified. But being scared of love doesn't make it go away. This isn't about. Oh, shut up. She reached over and turned off the engine. You're doing exactly what you did after Mom and Dad died. Pushing everyone away because loving people means risking losing them. The mention of their parents hit him like a physical blow. Don't. No, you need to hear this. Mom and Dad's accident wasn't your fault. You were 12, Nathan. And turning yourself into some emotionless robot won't bring them back. I have a company to run. And how's that working out? Your assistant says you've been staring at blank walls in meetings. You haven't signed a single contract in weeks. Nathan closed his eyes, remembering how Lily used to leave sticky notes on his important documents, little jokes or reminders to beat lunch. I can't. Can't what? Feel? Newsflash. Big brother, you already do. The question is whether you're brave enough to admit it. A knock on the window made them both jump. Rick, Amy's fiancé, peeked in. Babe, your mom's looking for you. Something about photos. Amy squeezed Nathan's hand. Come to the reception. Stay for one dance. Remember what it feels like to be part of something real. That evening, watching his little sister dance with the man she loved, Nathan felt something crack in his carefully constructed walls. He remembered Lily's words about art reminding us we're human. His phone buzzed. His best friend David, 911. Need you at the hospital. 20 minutes later, Nathan ran through sterile hallways to find David pacing outside an emergency room. Kim's in labor, David said, his face pale. 2 months early. They won't tell me anything. Nathan stayed. Hours passed. He watched his always confident friend fall apart with worry, then cry with joy when the doctor finally announced mother and baby were stable. Want to meet your goddaughter? David asked later, leading him to the nursery window. Nathan stared at the tiny bundle. I'm not qualified. None of us are, that's the point. David's eyes were soft. Life's messy, man. The best parts always are. Dawn found Nathan in his office, looking at old family photos he'd locked away years ago. His mother's laugh. His father's proud smile. Memories he'd buried because they hurt too much. His sister's words echoed, being scared of love doesn't make it go away. He picked up his phone, scrolling to Lily's number. In the background, a news segment caught his attention. They were featuring her gallery's closing sale. The reporter was saying, despite local protests, the historic wine gallery will close its doors next week. Nathan's hand tightened on his phone. For the first time in his adult life, he let himself really feel the pain of loss, the fear of vulnerability, and something else. Something that felt like hope. He opened his laptop and began to type. Not a contract or a business proposal, but something far more terrifying, the truth. Hours later, his assistant found him still there, surrounded by papers and memories. Sir? Your morning meetings. Cancel everything. Nathan stood, his decision made. I need to go somewhere. But the board meeting. Tell them, he paused at the door. Tell them sometimes the best business decisions aren't about business at all. As he drove toward the gallery, Nathan realized something. The world hadn't ended when he let himself feel. The sky hadn't fallen when he showed weakness. Maybe, just maybe, the real strength wasn't in being heartless at all. Now he just had to hope it wasn't too late to prove it. The wine gallery looked different in the morning light, with closing sale signs plastered across its elegant windows. Nathan stood outside, watching workers pack paintings into crates. His carefully prepared speech felt hollow now. Inside, he found Lily directing the packing process, her hair tied back messily, eyes tired but determined. She froze when she saw him. If you're here about the contract, my lawyer. I'm here about Paris, he interrupted. His research team had discovered her job offer at the Louvre. Don't take it. Her laugh was bitter. You don't get to have a say in my life anymore. I know. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. But before you decide, there's something you need to see. Against her better judgment, she followed him outside to where his car waited. The drive was silent, tension thick between them. They'd pulled up to a familiar building, the children's hospital they'd visited months ago. "Nathan, what are we doing here?" Instead of answering, he led her inside. The pediatric wing had transformed. Where there had been stark walls, now vibrant murals bloomed. Children's artwork hung in special frames. A small art studio stood fully equipped. "What is this?" "The Cross Foundation Arts Therapy Program." He watched a young patient proudly show her painting to a therapy teacher. "Your idea, remember? You said art helps people heal." Lily touched a wall covered in children's handprints. "You did this?" "The paperwork went through last week. Full funding for 10 years. He hesitated. "It's not the only one. There are 6 more programs starting across the city." "Why?" "Because you were right." The words rushed out. "About everything. I've spent my life hiding from feelings, treating people like business assets because it was safer than risking pain." He pulled out his phone, showing her a video. It was him, speaking at a press conference she'd missed. "Today, Cross Industries announces a new direction. Our worth won't be measured just in profit margins, but in lives touched, dreams supported, and communities strengthened." Lily's eyes widened. The board must have had a fit. They did. Until they saw the public response. He moved closer. "But I didn't do it for them. I did it because a remarkable woman taught me that real strength isn't about control, it's about having the courage to be vulnerable." "Nathan." "I went to therapy," he blurted out. "Been going for weeks, talking about my parents, about why I shut down after they died. It's hard, but necessary." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I love you." The words he fought for so long came easily now. Not as a business arrangement or a contract obligation. "I love your passion for art, your kindness, the way you see beauty in broken things. Even the way you challenge everything I thought I knew about myself." He reached for her hand, heart pounding. "I know I hurt you. I know I don't deserve another chance. But if you're willing, I'd like to try again. No contracts, no terms. Just us figuring it out together." "And what about Paris?" "That's your choice. But if you stay," he swallowed hard, "the gallery's yours. No loans, no investors. Just you running it your way." "I don't want your money, Nathan." "It's not about money. It's about believing in something. In someone." He gestured at the children's artwork. "You taught me that." A small patient tugged at Lily's sleeve, showing her a colorful drawing. As she knelt to admire it, Nathan saw her in a new light, not as an asset or a partner, but as the woman who'd broken down his walls simply by being herself. "I can't promise I won't mess up," he said softly. "I'm still learning. But I promise to try. To feel. To be real with you, even when it's scary." Lily stood, her eyes meeting his. "And if I say no?" "Then I'll respect that, but I'll still change. Still try to be better." He managed a small smile. "You've already taught me too much to go back to who I was." The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility. In a nearby room, a child's laughter echoed, reminding them both that sometimes the best things in life can't be controlled or predicted. They just have to be brave enough to be felt. 1 year later, Nathan stood in the remodeled wine gallery, watching crowds move through the anniversary exhibition. The space hummed with life, conversation mixing with soft music, classical piano, of course. "Mr. Cross." A young artist approached, clutching a portfolio. "I just wanted to thank you and Mrs. Cross for the foundation grant. My students at the community center, it's changed their lives." Nathan smiled, a real smile, the kind that still felt new but right. "Thank Lily. She's the one who saw your potential." Speaking of his wife, his eyes found her across the room, radiant in a simple blue dress, explaining a bold abstract piece to some visitors. She caught his gaze and winked. A year ago, she'd given him a second chance, but with conditions. No more hiding behind wealth or power. They would build something real together. The gallery had reopened with a new mission, part traditional gallery, part community art center, part therapy space. Lily's vision, supported by his resources, had created something neither could have managed alone. Lost in thought, she appeared at his side, slipping her hand into his. Remembering, he squeezed her fingers. "You know, I used to think love was a weakness. And now, Now I know it's the strongest thing there is." The sound of small feet made them turn. A group of children from the hospital arts program rushed in, proudly carrying their works for the special exhibition section. "Look, Mrs. Liley." One little girl held up a bright painting. "I made it just like you taught me." Nathan watched his wife kneel down, giving the child her full attention. A year of therapy had helped him understand why he shut down after losing his parents. But Lily had shown him how to open up again, how to build something stronger than walls. Their marriage contract sat framed in his office now, not as a binding document, but as a reminder of how far they'd come. Next to it hung the first piece of art he bought himself, chosen not for investment value but simply because it moved him. "They're ready for your speech," his assistant whispered. Nathan nodded, but first pulled Lily aside. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For teaching me that real love isn't about control or convenience. It's about growing together, even when it's messy." She straightened his tie with familiar tenderness. "You taught me some things too, you know, like how strength can be gentle and how some business decisions should come from the heart." Together, they faced the gathered crowd. Nathan looked at the faces, artists, patients, students, colleagues, all touched by their shared vision. His prepared speech felt unnecessary now. Instead, he spoke from the heart. "A year ago, I thought I had everything figured out. Success was about control, emotions were weakness, and love was just another business transaction. I was wrong." He glanced at Lily, drawing strength from her presence. Real success isn't measured in profit margins. It's measured in lives touched, in moments shared, in the courage to be vulnerable. "My wife taught me that. And together, we're learning that the best things in life aren't the ones we can control. They're the ones we're brave enough to feel." Later that night, in their home that was no longer just a penthouse, but a space filled with art and music and life, Lily played the piano while Nathan listened, no longer pretending to work. "Happy?" she asked, her fingers dancing over the keys. He thought about the journey from heartless billionaire to someone learning to feel, to care, to love. About how the messiest parts of life had become the most beautiful. "More than I ever thought possible," he answered truthfully. And as the music filled their home, Nathan Cross, who once believed in nothing but cold logic and careful control, finally understood that some things couldn't be measured or managed. They could only be felt, cherished, and shared. Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't the ones we plan, but the ones that plan us, teaching us, changing us, showing us who we really are when we're brave enough to feel. The end.